In this video, we will go over the effects of your stance setup on your wakeboard so you can ride with a position that is more ideal and less conducive to injury. Your stance angle and stance width can greatly increase or decrease the amount of torque put on your knees and back, while at the same time, they can give you more or less stability, which is directly related to landing tricks more easily. Let's start with your stance width. The inserts on your board give you a wide range of stance options. The narrowest and widest inserts are really there only to accommodate riders who still like to ride with an asymmetric stance. An asymmetric stance is a stance that is off-centered in position and closer to one tip of the board or the other, usually the tail. Manufacturers are slowly phasing the narrowest inserts out since the majority of riders stand symmetrically on their boards out towards the widest inserts so they can ride switch stance just like they do regular. If you ride a symmetrical stance, meaning your stance is centered in the middle of the board no matter what the width, the narrowest inserts won't give you enough stability tip and tail and you will tip over easily on landings. This narrow stance can also put stress on the inside of your knees if you take a fall by tipping over towards the nose or tail of the board. On the other hand, the widest inserts offer much more stability, but can also put stress on the knees if a tipping over landing should occur if the stance is too wide for the rider's body type or height. Being too wide does reduce the tendency to tip over side to side, but if it does happen, it can cause injury easily. Along with the stability factor, your stance width can also put more or less strain on your back. If your stance width is to the extreme, it limits the distance you can sit down to absorb landings, putting strain on your back and hips. The wider stance also directs the impact inward instead of up your spine, which also contributes to back injuries and harder landings as well. On the other side of the spectrum, a very narrow stance enables the rider to take an impact easily since the body is designed to take impact with a narrower stance, but your stability will suffer while narrower. A good rule of thumb in determining stance width is a little wider than shoulder width apart for a good combination of stability and range of motion. Stance angle is another factor though, so before you determine your actual stance width, let's go over how the angle of your bindings can affect how much you can bend on your wakeboard. An old school asymmetrical stance setup usually positions the back foot completely straight, while the front foot is turned forward or ducked out a bit. This puts less strain on the rider when riding regular, but makes riding switch stance very difficult. Riding symmetrical in relation to angle positions the rider on the board so their switch stance is a mirror image of their regular position, and it is very common for riders to turn their bindings so they are evenly ducked out like they would normally stand on the ground. A duck stance turns the bindings out just like a duck would stand on the ground, and most people are naturally duck stanced. If you turn your bindings inward or pigeon-toed, the amount of stress put on your knees is increased tremendously if a twisting fall should occur, and you should never set up your board in this fashion. A good test to see how much your bindings should be turned out or ducked is to jump high in the air and land without looking down at the ground. After landing, look down at your feet to see how your body reacts naturally to impact and position your stance angle on the board in the same way. Now this angle also has an effect on how much you can bend or the amount of stress that is placed on your knees during a fall. The wider you stand on the board, the more your feet should be turned inward so your knees can still roll inward as they bend. If your stance angle is turned out too much with a wide stance, your knee is exposed to injury if you fall with one leg straight and the other bent. The straight leg will be turned, directing all the force inward on the knee. If your feet are turned more towards straight with a wider stance, your knees can roll inward, which reduces the chance of injury. Everyone's stance width and angle is different, and the way their legs are built can determine the angle and width. On land, go through different stance angles, widths, and setups to see what works best for your body, and try to find a stance that gives you the range of motion needed to take impact, while at the same time relieving stress on your knees as you bend and lean over the tip and tail of the board.